Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, if anyone's on our side of the pond. I'm just going to share my screen so that we can get started. Okay, great. So good. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. This is really exciting for my colleague and I, Nil, to be speaking with you all today. We had a great time presenting almost over a year ago at the DataViz conference in Luxembourg. So it's nice to be back, even if it means virtually this way. So my name is Annie. I am the Senior Software Product Manager at the Growth Lab. I am joined by my colleague Nil this morning as well. Nil is our information designer. Nil will be presenting later on in this presentation. So today we're going to cover a few things. We're going to talk about who the Harvard Growth Lab is, what we do at the Harvard Growth Lab. We have a tool at the Growth Lab called the Viz Hub. I'm going to show you what I mean by that today. We're going to talk about what we mean by research-centric digital tools. Nil is going to walk us through her amazing design process. We're going to talk about bringing it all together and then some best practices. And I think we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So a little bit about the Harvard Growth Lab. The Harvard Growth Lab is a research center at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we work to understand the dynamics of growth and to translate those insights into more effective policymaking in developing countries and urban centers all over the world. And so we place increased economic diversity and complexity at the center of the development story and really try to uncover how countries move into industries that offer increased productivity. So in 2020, the Growth Lab conducted research in roughly 12 developing countries around the world, really with a focus on policymaking. So there's three core pillars at the Growth Lab. The first is academic research. The second is applied research and country projects. So this is where we take what we've learned through our academic research and actually put it to work in countries and cities all over the world. And then there's the digital development and design team. This is the team that Nil and I sit on. And our job on the digital development and design team is really to translate research and insights from the Growth Lab into online web applications and interactive storytelling. We know at the Growth Lab that digital applications are quickly evolving they're evolving as a core domain in the world of economic policymaking, because oftentimes user-friendly digital platforms make important and complex research findings accessible and actionable to lots of people. So it's no surprise that if you put your work on a website and share that work, the potential for its reach is quite broad. So over the last decade at the Growth Lab, this collaboration between academic research, applied research, and digital development has really come together nicely, and it's exemplified in what we call the Viz Hub. So the Viz Hub is our portfolio of visualization tools, and I'm going to show you a little preview of what the Viz Hub involves. So it's simply found at growthlab.app. And it's a really easy way to discover all of our digital tools in one place, big and small. And so our flagship tool is the Atlas of Economic Complexity. I bet there's a number of people on this call who are familiar with the Atlas. I think we showed it in our last presentation, and it's kind of our longest standing tool. And it really exemplifies this collaboration between research, policy work, design, data sets, and pedagogy. And so the Atlas is really a research and data visualization tool that allows people to analyze the economic dynamics of every country in the world and the growth opportunities that exist for these countries. And so we designed the Atlas to have three main entry points. The one that's the most popular is Explore. And this is really like a choose your own adventure. In the Explore section, we cover every single country in the world, and we cover over 6,000 traded products and also services. And the idea here is that you can come in here and really get a sense of the trade patterns within and among and between countries. And we use this as a proxy to understand what countries are capable of, and therefore the opportunities that exist from where they are today. So I'm showing you Turkey right now. These are Turkey's exports in 2018. We can look at its imports as well. We can also look at this data over various different data visualizations. So we like to show the data in different ways depending on what your interests are. So here we're showing the market share of various different sectors of Turkish exports over time. We also have the product space, which shows the relatedness between products that are exported in Turkey and also the feasible opportunities for the country. And the great thing about this section is that you can look at this data over a long period of time, all the way back to 1962. So the Explore section is really a choose your own adventure, and it involves endless permutations between different countries and the products that they export and import. But we also know that an important way to think about a country's growth story is in a little bit more of a structured narrative. And that's why we built country profiles. So country profiles take you through this sort of structured beginning, middle, and end of a country's growth story over time. So you see some of those familiar visualizations from the Explore side, but also other ways of thinking about growth dynamics, market share, and diversification in a country. And then the last way we think about coming into the Atlas is through our complexity rankings. So every year we actually rank the complexity of over 100 countries throughout the world, and we would not be doing our job if we did not visualize those findings. So here you can see the economic complexity of Lithuania over time, Latvia, Serbia, South Africa, all the way down here to Venezuela, Ghana, Mozambique, and so on. We also give people the opportunity to compare countries side by side over different years, spans that you might care about. And then finally, just a plain table that ranks the countries by their economic complexity index, and that change over time. So lots of ways to get into the Atlas, and it certainly is our biggest tool. It has seen over 1.2 million users since its beginning. Just last year, we had 4.7 million page views in the Atlas. And it's used in classes at Harvard, our executive education program. It's used by policymakers all over the world, journalists, academics, and so on. And so what those numbers really tell us is the kind of reach that a web page can really have versus, say, for example, a research paper. But we build all kinds of tools at the Growth Lab. And not all of them are as big and sort of robust as the Atlas. And we wanted to make sure that the Viz Hub provided a way to find all of those tools. So you can come in here in this nice grid pattern and sort of explore and just get a sense of what's available. Our newest work is always at the top, but then you can also come in here and search. And this is really where we wanted to provide a link across everything we do. So you might come into the Viz Hub and say, hey, I'm a policymaker who's really interested in these Atlas projects. I want everything all in one place. And of course, here's the Atlas of Economic Complexity, but we also built an Atlas just for the country of Colombia. And then we have our globe here of economic complexity. If anyone is interested in where the Atlas originates from, here is its inspiration. We built this years and years and years ago, and this is kind of the origins of the Atlas. And even though it's sort of dated at this point, I still think it looks quite cool from a DataViz perspective. And so you might also come into the Viz Hub and say, it's not really the type of project I'm interested in. I'm interested in a country. So you might come in here and say, great, show me everything related to Albania. And I can come in here and actually see that there's projects that we've built related to a single country. So here's Albania's industry targeting dashboard. This is a DataViz platform we built working with an investment promotion group in Albania. And you can see its scope is much smaller than something like the Atlas, but it still puts data visualization at its core to understand investment opportunities in that country. And of course, you might come to the bottom here and say, tell me more. And it takes you out to Albania's country profile, right where we started. So I think that the Viz Hub has been a really nice way for us to bring all of our tools together, but also give a sense of all the different ways data visualization can be used across the world for different policy purposes. I think it's also important to highlight that the nature of our tools that we build are research-centric, and that's very different than building commercial software. So the reason why it's different is because we can't simply look to the market and hear that there's demand for a certain tool and build it. Instead, we have to start with a research methodology and then validated data, and then insights from applied research. And only once those things are in place, can we actually get to work building our tools. And so this is really the opposite of how most commercial markets work, where you kind of listen for external demand and then build it. Our tools are not just visualization engines. They're a way to learn and to apply research. And so, of course, we have to wait until that research is prepared. And so one implication that has for our team is that the digital development and design team at the Growth Lab is in-house, and that's unique. We know that there are lots of research organizations that will outsource their tool development, and it has a downside because it means that the development team and the data visualization design is not embedded with the research. And we have found over the years so much advantage to being embedded in the research conversation. It means for us at the Growth Lab, when we build our tools, some of our core users are sitting right next to us. So lots of our strategy and our buy-in and our validation and our testing of concepts starts with our colleagues, not customers. So it's a little bit of a reversal. The other thing is that because we're working with really complex research and very, very complex new data, learnability has to be a core feature in our DataViz tools. So it means that when we build our tools, one of the things we test from the very start is, can someone actually learn what this concept means through data visualization? It's not an obvious yes. And so many times we have to go back to the drawing board and say the DataViz that we built is too complicated and we have to work on making it better. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nil to explain how we design our data visualizations in this unique environment. So Nil, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Annie. So I'll share. Actually, one thing, I apologize that I'm going to keep my camera off and then just put a different microphone. It is because the actually video and sound has been breaking for me a lot. So I'll share my screen. Okay, do you see the new screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just a moment, sorry. Hello, my name is Nil Tuzcu. I work as an information designer at the Growth Lab. My responsibilities include DataViz and user experience design, and I will present our design process. Okay, I would love to start by introducing our general design process. Before I begin, it's important to note that this diagram is specifically showing the design process of our tools. There are always research and data activities before, after, and during our design process. Different from a typical user-centered design approach, our design process is based on data, academic research, and users. Typically, the user-centered design approach starts with understanding user needs around a loosely defined problem. Just like in the commercial products or software services. However, our team has a well-defined problem, which is to make data and academic research at Growth Lab accessible and useful. So our approach can be defined as a data-oriented design approach, the aim of which is to effectively communicate data and research outcomes to the people, to the larger community. Okay. Well, in our process, the first step is to understand and get familiar with the research topics and the related data sets that are provided by the researchers to our team. We work with a variety of data sets that are ranging from global trade flows to growth forecasting in country level to employment data in city level. We often meet with research fellows in the Growth Lab to better understand their research concepts, methodologies, and insights. This is a very critical phase because we need to ensure that we understand what the researcher is trying to communicate, what is the most important insight obtained from a study, and which part of data is more important to know about. In order to ensure we are on the same page with the research team, we often make quick sketches and prototypes to share with them. Through this feedback cycle, we educate ourselves about the data to the extent that we can start thinking about how to represent it later. As a designer, my goal is to translate their research insights and data into readable, understandable, and effective visualizations and storytelling experiences. Well, the second step in our design process is the user interviews and persona creations. I can give an example from our current user research process. For our new project, we established a pilot user group of 15 people from different backgrounds and regions around the world. We are currently conducting interviews with them to understand how our tool can be integrated into their work routine, into their daily work routine. Well, what we usually learn with these interviews is the variety of use cases and user types, each with different levels of technical competence and needs. After these interviews, we will create personas for our new tool. data sets, mocking up a quick user interface, or sometimes creating a high-fidelity interactive prototypes. And we, once more, work closely with the researchers in our lab. We organize multiple feedback sessions to see if we get the visualization right and if the visualizations are answering the research questions. Also, something that we do is that we always work with design options and create multiple different visualization types. And we usually present a selection during these feedback sessions. Well, in addition to the feedback sessions with the Growth Lab Research Fellows, we also conduct user tests. We usually ask either Harvard Kennedy School students or data scientists and data visualization designer colleagues to test our prototypes so that we can see the problems in usability and also learnability in our tools. Okay, well, although I describe each step one by one, by no means this is a linear process. We always go back and forth during design, and sometimes we even start the process all over again. On the right side of the screen, I put some design iterations from the project, the Atlas of Economic Complexity Country Profiles. As you see, we designed many different methods to present information. At the same time, we went back and forth between simple draft wireframes and more colorful interactive prototypes. And I can say that it took us around 8 months to get the design right. I just described our general design process, introducing different phases and steps. We, as the design and development team, are often asked, how do we exactly take the data and turn it into rich interactive platforms? So I'd like to detail our visual and experience design activities here. Well, first of all, I always make a differentiation between exploratory data visualization and information design. When I first get the data, I create exploratory data visualization in order to understand the patterns and trends in the data. In this phase, the questions I'm trying to answer are, what is this data set? What does it supposed to tell us? What are the general patterns and trends in these data sets? Exploratory visuals are quick draft graphics, and they are not meant to communicate information with the users. So in a way, they are just for us to understand the data. And during this process, we try a variety of different visual encoding techniques, such as plotting the data as a network or UMap or like a scatter plot or a flowchart. Well, the selection of visual encoding techniques depends on our research questions and types of the data. Well, the outcome of this first pillar, exploratory DataViz, would be the image you see on the top, a simple scatter plot with some simple plain blue nodes. So once we understand what this data is supposed to communicate with our audience, then we create information designs. Different from exploratory data visualization, this time, we are designing a visual for our users to interact with. So the question is, how do we communicate this information with our users? And for this, we use different techniques such as visual highlighting, labels, text, different color ranges, contrast, repetition, and layout design. On the right, you can see the differences between an exploratory scatter plot and a design communicative scatter plot. And also because the fact that our visualizations are usually very data intense, we usually use visual highlighting in order to get users' attention to certain aspects on our design. Well, the final design pillar is to design the overall user experiences, or in the case of data visualization, we can call this phase narrative design. So let's say that we have all the graphics, media, and the information that we want to present to the user. At this point, the question becomes, how do we organize all this information? And what is the overall user experience? Or simply to put it, how do people get to the visualizations? Well, through storyboards, user flow studies, we create a story for our users to follow and interact with. And I will explain some narrative visualization techniques that we use on some sample projects. Okay, so another unique part of our work is that most of our tools are used by policymakers. But during our user research and user testing, we try to employ users who are in the policymaking world. So right now, I'm showing a data visualization we designed that directly targets policymakers. Well, this is a quadrant chart plotting countries. And based on certain potentials and data points, we assign a policy recommendation to each country, such as parsimonious industry policy approach or technological frontier approach. And also for the policymakers, we designed a flow chart for each policy approach in order to disclose our logic as clearly as possible. Well, these flow charts asks questions about your country, and based on your responses, you get your policy recommendation. Well, I believe that the design of this chart is a good example of, the design of this chart is a good example of visualizing data for the policymakers. Well, we always make sure that we explain the logic behind any decision in a transparent and comprehensive way. When explaining our design process, I mentioned about different ways of composing our story and communicating the research with our user community. In general, we take two distinct approaches. The one approach is often called user-driven, and in which we design tools for users to explore and play with the data. Such storytelling relies on users' interaction. Well, our project, Atlas Explore, is an ideal example for user-driven storytelling. In the Explore platform, users can build hundreds of visualizations and further customize the information through using many available options in the settings panel. While here, user flow is a free form, meaning that users can follow their own workflow. While there are also a variety of ways of interacting with the data, such as filtering some data points, changing some labels, or or at the same time changing data categorization. Well, this kind of build your own visualization interfaces don't usually include heavy messaging. For example, in our tool, in the Atlas Explorer, we don't display any text or narrative to the user. Well, the challenge with this kind of user-driven storytelling is that there is usually a high learning curve. Well, in these cases, users need to be guided how to use different tools, buttons, settings, visualizations, and so on. Okay, so, well, on the other hand, in a designer-driven, or some cases, this is called author-driven, users follow a story that was already created for them. In this case, the data points and visualizations are chosen by the developer team and presented to the user as a finished product. The narrative is usually linear or close to being linear. Well, our Atlas country profile is a typical example of a designer-driven platform. In this project, we designed 12 pages that tells a created story about a country's economic structure, market dynamics, and growth opportunities. While there are still some interactions available to the user, such as tooltips or changing some of the data points, but in comparison to the Atlas Explorer, the ability to interact with data is very limited. Well, in this project, we also include a narrative that will go with each page. And also, while the challenge with the user-driven storytelling is the problems with the learnability of the platform, the challenge with designer-driven storytelling is the bias about presenting the users with a pre-selected and decided set of visualizations and data points. Well, to sum up this section, Atlas of Economic Complexity is a unique project in the sense that we provide users with two distinct approaches, Atlas Explorer and country profiles, so that they can choose either of them depending on their needs and domain knowledge. Okay, I would love to finish presenting our design process by showing a variety of design approaches from other projects. Although for the Atlas of Economic Complexity, while I differentiated between user and designer driven, they are not black and white approaches we take. Most of our projects use both or mixed methods. Depending on the research data and our target user community, we create different narrative visualization methods. For example, our country-specific projects can be used as a tool to build visualizations and also as a narrative tool to get general knowledge about the country. And we are currently building a new tool. And for this new tool, you see the top design on the bottom right. For example, in this one, different from the Atlas of Economic Complexity tools, we are trying to first show what this tool is about by displaying all questions that our platform can answer, and then let users choose what they are most interested in. Okay, to conclude, our design process is highly iterative and includes many feedback and user testing sessions with different stakeholders including the researchers in our lab and also policymakers in different countries. Well, this concludes my presentation, and now I will pass it back to Annie. And thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Nil. And I'm going to go back and share my screen and just conclude a little bit by talking about how this all comes together. So Nil has outlined for us her amazing design process. And fortunately, unfortunately, when the design process sort of comes to its conclusion, there's still a lot more work to do. So what you're seeing in front of you here is a very common site for the digital development and design team at the Growth Lab. And what you can see here is we've taken Nil's wireframing, which looks very good, and we've plotted it in the order we think a user might go through it. So what you're looking at here is actually the paper version of what became our Albania industry targeting dashboard. It started as sketches, as Nil demonstrated, and it ended up as a semi-validated wireframe. And then we plotted out here across the board. And every single sticky note that you're looking at here is a feature we have to build to make this page come true. And once this happens, this is really when we start to talk about the data we're going to need, how we build a back-end architecture to support the tool, the technologies we're going to use to build the tool as well. So the Albania dashboard, just to give you a sense, took us about, let's see here, get out of here. Took us about 3 months to build in total. So quite a bit of work there. And so the last thing I'll just conclude with is just some best practices we've learned along the way as we build our tools. And so the first one that I will start with, let me just, I think I lost my screen share. Okay, here we go. Great. Okay, so the first one I'll start with in terms of a best practice that we really try to follow on our team is to begin with small units of value and then iterate. There's a very common metaphor we use in our team called the skateboard and the Ferrari. It looks something like this. And so we say we don't like to build our tool so that we start with a singular component and then another component, and you only know if the thing is working once it's completely built. We talk about building a skateboard first. So the whole point that this user has is to get from A to B. We know you want a really amazing card to do that, but we think we can learn something from you if we just give you a skateboard to start. And then you're going to use a skateboard and you're going to say, I think I need some handlebars. Great, we'll build handlebars. I think I need something a little bit faster. Great, we'll build a bike. And so all the while we're iterating our product, the user is still able to derive value from it. The other thing we've learned is the necessity to prepare for a lengthy and non-linear discovery period. When we're working with researchers, a long phase in the project is just trying to understand what the research is telling us, and then trying to understand what the data is telling us. And it requires endless conversation between digital development and research, just trying to understand what the concepts are, what the methodologies look like, and then how we can interpret it. The third thing we really try to keep in mind is to be wary of misinterpretation. So I think it's a common analogy that in data visualization, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that can be very true. But we have also learned through observing users in the Atlas and in other tools we've built, even beautifully designed data visualization can be misinterpreted. And so things that we've tried to do to avoid those scenarios is to provide all kinds of opportunities to interpret the data visualization easily. This includes tooltips, glossaries, little pop-up windows on how to read a data visualization. I think sometimes a common pitfall is that people think that just because the data visualization is on a page that the concept has been explained. We have found over and over again that that is not true, that the DataViz often needs supplemental features around it for accurate interpretation. The other thing we really try to do in our tool is to show the magic. So because we hope that our tools are actually used to inspire policymaking and to make decisions, we can't just take for granted that people take our word for things. We actually have to show some of the magic behind the tool in order to build a credible tool, really. And then finally, reuse what's working. So in the Albania tool that I showed, so much of what we built there actually worked very well with our counterparts. And so we built that tool as a template. And we built almost exactly the same tool for a project we were working on in Jordan. And we'll build almost exactly the same tool for a new country project we have. And that's because we know it works well, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So I'm going to stop there. I'll stop sharing my screen here. I've seen lots of good questions come in through chat, and it looks like we have a few minutes left to the hour. So I'd be happy to take any questions people have.
Annie, thanks a lot for this presentation, and Neil. And you already answered most of the questions. I think basically everything. If someone else has a question which was not addressed yet, please put it in the chat box. And I think also the answers are very worthwhile reading because they explain everything in detail. Let's give everyone maybe... Here a question from Beatrice. Dear both, on the design process, how much time roughly do you dedicate on the different steps?
Well, it's hard to say exactly. I can offer some estimates, and by the way, it really depends on the project. So Nil was mentioning when we were working on the country profiles and the atlas, the design process alone took us 8 months. And that's because we were really starting from scratch. Whereas with the Albania dashboard that we were building, the design process maybe took us about a month. It was a much smaller tool. We're working on a project right now where the design process, and it's a completely new project for the Growth Lab, a new methodology, new data, and the design process, we're entering, I think, month 9 on the design process. So it really depends on the scope of the tool and our familiarity, I would say, with the research agenda. I don't think we've ever done a project where the design process was less than a month. But Nil, correct me if I'm wrong.